There is a chilling, cyclical pattern built directly into the mechanics of toxic relationships that leaves the human mind entirely disoriented and emotionally bankrupt. You experience a brutal discard. You endure the cold silence of being completely erased from someone's life, and you spend weeks or months painfully piecing your identity back together inside your computer workspace. Just as you finally begin to find your footing, just as your central nervous system starts to calm down and step out of the fog, a completely unexpected notification lights up your screen. It is a casual text message, a vague late-night email, or a sudden interaction on your social profile. This is not a genuine attempt at reconciliation or an act of sincere closure. In clinical psychology, this toxic behavior is known as hoovering. Named after the vacuum cleaner, it is a highly calculated, manipulative strategy designed to suck a victim back into a destructive emotional loop. To the conscious ego, receiving this message can feel like a profound validation or a sign of genuine remorse. But beneath the surface, it is a sophisticated psychological trap. The narcissist has not changed. They have simply run out of attention elsewhere and have returned to exploit your empathy, completely blinding you to reality simply to secure their next hit of validation. To understand why this trap is so incredibly effective, we must analyze the core mechanism of narcissistic supply. In social and clinical psychology, a narcissist does not operate with a stable, internally generated sense of self-worth. Their ego is an entirely hollow chamber that requires constant, external confirmation to survive. This confirmation, whether it comes in the form of praise, admiration, financial status, or absolute emotional control, is what psychologists define as supply. When a narcissist discards you, it is usually because they believe they have found a fresh, higher-yielding source of supply elsewhere. However, new sources of attention eventually fade, require actual effort to maintain, or see through the manipulation. When this happens, the narcissist experiences a severe psychological collapse known as narcissistic injury. To avoid facing the terrifying emptiness of their own true identity, their subconscious executes an immediate retreat to a past environment where validation was once guaranteed. They do not return because they value your unique humanity. They return because your historical data proves that you are a highly reliable source of emotional fuel, treating your empathy as a commodity to be recycled at their convenience. The reason a hoovering attempt triggers such intense panic and confusion inside your body is found entirely in the neurobiology of trauma bonding and the dopamine reward pathway. When you are involved with a toxic individual, the relationship is never peaceful. It alternates violently between intense bursts of affection and sudden periods of brutal cruelty. This erratic pattern alters the chemical landscape of your brain, constructing a profound addiction. Neuroscientists have discovered that intermittent reinforcement, where a reward is completely unpredictable, triggers the highest levels of dopamine release possible in mammalian biology. It is the exact same neurological loop that anchors a gambling addiction. When the narcissist suddenly reappears after months of absence, your brain does not process the threat logically. Instead, the sight of their name triggers an immediate, massive wave of dopamine through your reward center, instantly overriding your logical prefrontal cortex. Your body physically craves the relief of their validation to stop the agony of withdrawal. The crowd of your own thoughts is silenced as your brain prioritizes immediate chemical relief over long-term emotional safety, forcing you to become blind to the past abuse simply to secure a temporary drop of relief. When this intense neurochemical alarm fires upon their return, the victim's subconscious mind deploys an automated defensive maneuver known as cognitive dissonance minimization. This is a psychological shield where the brain actively attempts to reconcile two completely contradictory realities: the memory of the cruel person who destroyed your peace and the image of the seemingly gentle, apologetic person standing in front of you right now. The ego cannot handle the extreme internal friction of holding both of these truths at once. To protect your pride from the terrifying realization that you are inviting a predator back into your life, your mind performs a catastrophic rewriting of history. It begins inventing comforting justifications. It tells a story. Perhaps they have finally realized my true worth. Perhaps the time apart made them grow, or perhaps I was too harsh in my original assessment. Notice how the mind weaponizes your own capacity for empathy to shield you from the painful reality of their malice. This process happens entirely beneath your conscious awareness, leaving you entirely convinced that you are being forgiving and mature, while your brain is actually lowering your defenses to keep your narrative aligned with a dangerous illusion. The primary weapon a narcissist uses to execute a successful Hoover is a psychological strategy called baiting through vulnerability. A skilled manipulator does not return with overt aggression. They return by presenting themselves as completely broken, fragile, or in deep distress. They may claim they are experiencing a medical emergency, a sudden financial crisis, or severe emotional depression. This choice of entry point is calculated with absolute precision. The narcissist knows that your core identity is rooted in empathy, kindness, and a desire to heal others. By presenting themselves as a victim, they construct an intense ethical trap. If you ignore their message, your internal moral baseline screams that you are being cruel, selfish, and unfeeling. This clash creates immediate cognitive dissonance. To resolve this internal agony and maintain your self-image as a good person, your mind creates an escape hatch. It forces you to respond, choosing to breach your own boundaries under the guise of an act of mercy. Your brain uses rationalization to turn a complete collapse of your self-protection into an act of noble sacrifice, choosing the comfort of a shared delusion today over the safety of an independent boundary tomorrow. Alongside vulnerability baiting, the manipulator utilizes a secondary, highly passive filter known as revisionist nostalgia. This is the tactic where the Hoovering message focuses exclusively on a highly specific, beautiful memory from the earliest days of the relationship, completely bypassing the months of chaos that followed. They will send a picture of an old vacation spot, mention a song you used to share, or bring up an inside joke. This filter ensures that your mind actively blocks out the consequences of their actions, while overemphasizing the intense comfort of past belonging. Revisionist nostalgia transforms your mental landscape into a blank space where independent integrity feels entirely unnecessary. It allows you to participate in your own deception, entirely convinced that the early idealized version of the person was their true identity, and that the abuse was merely an aberration. Your brain uses the fear of permanent loss to lock you in a prison of performance, sacrificing your integrity today just to secure the temporary comfort of group validation from a crowd of one, keeping you completely blind to the reality that the trap is closing again. These abstract biological filters manifest daily in devastating real-world loops, the most common of which is the trap of the shared digital ghost. In our modern digital landscape, a narcissist does not need to show up at your doorstep to execute a Hoover. They use the digital connectivity of your computer workspace to haunt your environment. They will look at your social stories from an anonymous account like an old post from 3 years ago, or change their public playlist to a song that carries deep private meaning for you. This ambient hoovering is designed to exploit your predictive processing engine. Your brain is a machine that demands closure and patterns. When it detects these vague, low-risk digital signals, it immediately goes into overdrive trying to solve the puzzle. You find yourself spending hours analyzing their digital footprint, checking their status, and discussing the hidden meaning with your friends. This collective passivity creates an absolute optical illusion of a deep, unresolved cosmic connection. The manipulator achieves total access to your mental real estate without ever having to apologize or take responsibility, entirely blind to the reality that you are voluntarily keeping your own trauma alive. We see this exact same self-sabotage playing out in our social circles through the destructive pattern of flying proxy intervention. This occurs when the narcissist realizes that you have built a strong, independent boundary and are successfully ignoring their direct messages. To shatter your defense, they recruit mutual friends, family members, or colleagues, known in psychology as flying monkeys, to execute the hoover on their behalf. These third-party proxies will approach you with complete innocence, saying things like, "They look so miserable without you," or "They truly miss your presence in the group." When you carry an intense fear of social exclusion or being viewed as the villain of your social circle, your predictive tracking engine panics. Your subconscious actively forces you to play a safe, agreeable role to maintain your standing in the pack. You soften your stance, agree to attend a shared event, or send a polite text to keep the peace, entirely convinced that this chameleon behavior is the only way to retain your social status. Your brain used the fear of standing out to lock you in a prison of compliance, sacrificing your personal safety just to secure temporary group validation. When this collective de-individuation and boundary erosion scales up, it produces a terrifying phenomenon known as systemic enabling. In families, workplaces, or entire organizations, a dominant, narcissistic leader can completely distort the ethical baseline of the entire group. When the toxic individual cycles through periods of abuse and hoovering, the members of the organization stop evaluating their behavior based on logic, data, or objective human consequence. Instead, they begin evaluating actions solely based on whether they maintain the comfort of the status quo. People choose to become passive echoes of a loud, dominant narrative, telling the victim to let it go, to forgive and forget, or to stop causing drama simply to avoid the discomfort of standing up to a predator. Mass conformity turns a population into a synchronized, unthinking herd that will gladly sacrifice its most vulnerable members and burn down its own institutions simply to protect the collective ego from the terrifying vulnerability of self-reflection, proving that an entire crowd can become blind to abuse just to maintain an illusion of tribal peace. The true danger of accepting a narcissistic hoover is that it constructs a perfectly closed, self-fulfilling cognitive loop that entirely blinds you to your own loss of agency. The cycle begins the moment you respond to the vague message, allowing the toxic individual back into your space. This environment creates immediate subconscious pressure to align, forcing your brain to reduce activity in its self-reflective and critical processing networks. Because your internal boundaries are lowered, you choose compliance, repeating their excuses or staying silent in the face of fresh disrespect. To clear the immediate wave of guilt, your mind instantly deploys cognitive dissonance minimization and rationalization, rewriting the event to convince your conscious ego that the person has truly changed. This failure to stand for your own independent truth is then used by your predictive engine as a new acceptable baseline for the future. When the next cycle of discard and hoover arrives, your mind looks at its past data and says, "We went back before and we survived, so it is safe to go back again." The loop closes perfectly, strengthening the neural pathways of moral blindness until you are a passive puppet to their whim. Dismantling this matrix of emotional recycling requires a rare, aggressive practice known as radical non-response. You cannot simply wish your trauma bonds away. Your brain's predictive engine demands hard, physical data points of independent defiance to override its automated survival networks. This reprogramming begins by learning an extraordinary truth uncovered in behavioral psychology. A manipulator does not require your love or your compliance to sustain their grip over your life. They only require your engagement. Even a highly negative response, a furious text, or a lengthy paragraph explaining your pain is registered by their subconscious as a massive victory because it proves that they still hold the power to disrupt your nervous system. The next time a toxic presence attempts to enter your workspace or light up your phone, do not look to the crowd for permission to stay silent. Recognize that your rising heart rate is your amygdala firing a compliance alarm. Force your physical body to execute an absolute blackout. Block the number, delete the profile, and leave the message entirely unread without offering a single word of explanation. By refusing to respond, you break the loop of interaction completely, starving the manipulation of its fuel and reclaiming your mind. Holding an absolute boundary and refusing to look back is an act of supreme psychological heroism, because it forces you to face the raw neural pain of withdrawal, isolation, and public visibility. Your brain will fight this process at every single turn, desperately screaming at you to check the message, find out what they want, and accept the comfortable shared illusions of the past, simply to keep your ego safe from the agony of closing the door forever. But now that you know the anatomy of the trap, now that you understand how your subconscious mind uses trauma bonding, cognitive dissonance, and revisionist nostalgia to turn you into an unthinking echo, the manipulator has lost their lock over your consciousness. You can choose to step out of the cycle and view your reality with absolute unyielding clarity. This navigation of your subconscious architecture is a lifelong education, and your brain utilizes dozens of other invisible neural mechanisms every single day to dictate your choices and trap you on autopilot without your consent. To shatter the rest of these hidden mental loops, discover how your mind fakes reality, and unlock the true mechanisms of your subconscious, click on the playlist appearing on your screen right now. We have built an entire archive of long-form psychological deep dives designed explicitly to help you look past the self-delusions of your ego. Click through, explore the library, and take absolute control of your psychology.